the Block Party. I'm your host, Joyce Conroy, and we are on Ernie's Corner with award-winning creative director and designer Ernie Cefalu. And Ernie, it's been so amazing, and it's wonderful because we are welcoming a lot of new members to the
Yeah.
Block. The name of the show, The Block Party, because it's all about music, fun, and we're giving them an education too. So you came up with a great idea to kind of look back, and those new family members are going to get to see what we've discussed, for so many wonderful segments.
Yeah. Well, hopefully just some of them, not all of them for sure. And then there's still many more to go. But you're right, Joyce. After a year and a half of doing this every Saturday night, I mean, I'm very, very comfortable here on the block. And I've noticed too that there's a lot of, really new neighbors that are coming along. Andreas, who's amazing person in Louisiana there, and just my brother, he is just an incredible person, and he along with a bunch of people that I went to high school with. I've plugged into San Jose High School, and some of those people are coming over and watching the block party and become, neighbors on the block, and it's really great. And yeah, I thought, maybe this might be an interesting time to let people know about a little bit more about Pacific Pioneer and the people that really started it all. And there are many people involved, but mainly the two that I'd like to focus on for this segment is Bill Garland and Drew Struzan. And when those two guys came along, and they were very close in joining Pacific Pioneer, we had started in 1972, January 1 of 72. And Dean Marion was our first employer. He was our production artist, an incredible production artist. Did all the mechanicals on board, illustration board with overlays and stuff for like the Doors Zoetrope and the Jefferson Airplane cigar box. I mean, being able to do production old school for things like that it was every bit an art as anything that I did or Drew or Bill or any of the other people that had become part of the art department at Pacific Pioneer. It was the heart of the company, the arms and legs of the company, and the brain of the company, business-wise, was my partner Tony, who was Craig Braun's vice president, and we had talked about that, how he and I had come out to California to open up an LA office for the guys we were working for, and ended up starting Pacific Pioneer. Joe Garnett came along as the first illustrator that we had on board, and then Joe went back on freelance around the same time, about a year, less than a year in. Drew Struzan came along, and he joined us. And then shortly after that, Bill Garland joined us. So the three of us really kind of all that early stuff. I think the most powerful album cover team out of the 189 album covers that we did at Pacific Pioneer was us three. It was Bill Garland, Drew Struzan, myself, and then there was Carl Ramsey, there was Ingrid Hinkey, there was Joe Garnett still working with us, but off on doing other things. And so we really, the three of us really were the core group that really started doing some pretty amazing things. Let me back up for just a second, and we revisited this. This was how I started with the Dolls Alive, International Paper Company's national sales meeting at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York. And I had the first half a day for a 3-day meeting with 500 salespeople. And so I had to create something unique. And this is like 1969. And I was one of my first big projects in New York. I had got a job at this agency, Carloni and Associates, and they were Lower Manhattan, and a small agency, but their biggest client was International Paper Company. So I got the assignment because I had kind of a California kind of feel to stuff that I did, very colorful, very powerful, but very Peter Max-ish. I was very influenced by Peter Max because I'm a symmetrical designer of symmetry I find great comfort in. And if you look at a lot of the stuff that I've done, Jesus Christ Superstar, I mean, all these symmetrical kind of images. And this was the poster that I did. This was some of the promotional pieces, direct mail pieces and stuff, letting the people know that are going to be attending, to sign up. Here's what you're going to be seeing. And then we created a record. We hired Skip Redwine, who was a songwriter, And we hired him to write 10 songs about paper. And we cut an album. We did 500 albums. And that's what you see here. That's the front cover there. This is what you open it up on the back, and I put a pair of lips on the label. So cut to, a year later, and I'm interviewing at Craig Braun after I had created Jesus Christ Superstar. And, this is how this is so funny, Joyce. Before I did the Rolling Stones tongue, I created this. So in between Dolls Alive and the Rolling Stones tongue, I created Jesus Christ Superstar. And we had talked about this in the show we had about it. I mean, I had given myself 4 days to create something, and I had a lot of magazines, and I would be looking through magazines and art magazines and just magazines in general. And I remember seeing this image, and this is a sunset. And I had already thought about using an angel because I didn't want to use Jesus Christ. I didn't want to use an image of Jesus Christ because it was already pretty heavy. They're very cautious about that. And I thought we could do something that was spiritual, something that was, captivating and eye-catching, but it isn't a picture of Jesus. But we all believe in angels, whether you believe in Jesus or not. There are angels, there are guardian angels, there are people that loved us and look out for us. And I had forgotten about seeing this image. And then there's about 7 or 8 months ago, Rab, who is a friend on Facebook, sent me this image and said, "Does this look familiar?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I remember seeing that." And I remember taking the one angel that I was doing and created something that looked like this. And that's what I created over here. So, and this has been what, 48 years, almost 50 years between when I looked at I had forgotten all about that. And all of a sudden this comes along, and it totally changed the way I created that Jesus Christ Superstar album. And in between, so then right after that, in my interview at Craig Braun, showing him this stuff, I showed him this, and he said, "Hey, you know what? If you go upstairs in my art department and put a tongue on the outside of those lips, I think I could sell that to the Rolling Stones." So basically, that's kind of what I did here. There's the stages of the drawing, the line art. This is the finished art. The sketch that I did was much more primitive than this. And he went off and sold it to Marshall Chess, who was at Andy Warhol's factory in Lower Manhattan. Here's a picture of Mick Jagger on their tour, their 72 tour, where he's wearing, and the rest of the band are wearing my logo on the lips. And there's a lot of controversy about me versus John Pache, Ruby Mazer, all these other people. And you know what? It doesn't really matter to me whether I was the chicken or the egg. Just to be one of the two is really most gratifying. I think we've talked about this, where I really actually think that John Pache's version of the Rolling Stones tongue is much more in line with the Rolling Stones. It's more like a caricature drawing than a stiff drawing like I did. Mick Jagger is certainly not stiff. He's all over that stage. And I think what John did was very representational of that. So after doing this logo, Craig Braun's vice president, Tony Graboy, and I went to California to establish the satellite office because the whole industry was moving to California, the West Coast. The sound was coming from there. Everything was being recorded in either San Francisco or Los Angeles at that time. Groups were flocking to Los Angeles to be discovered, getting premiere things at the Troubadour, Doug West's Troubadour, who was a brilliant man, and signed all these, let them perform, but they had to sign a 10-year agreement that they would come back every year at the same price he paid them. That guy was really smart, man. And the Troubadour is still around, but at one point that was the place that you got discovered. It was there. It was before the Roxy, before the whiskey. It was really, I think maybe the whiskey was there. I'm not sure if it was there before the Troubadour, but the Troubadour then, and all the executives, the record executives and stuff, would go to the Troubadour to discover these new bands. So a very smart move. And at that same time, Tony and I really sort of bonded and realized that, rather than doing what we had been doing for someone else, that we should really do it for ourselves, because we really didn't agree with the way business was being handled. And even though Tony was a vice president, he didn't have very much to say, and promises that were made weren't kept. I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir to you about this. I mean, you've never had that situation where they told you, it was all going to be great and it never was, It's just that's just how it works. Creative people like us, the business, we're on high on the list of, what they love to eat. We are on the top of the food chain for business people because creative people, all they need is a little recognition and be told how much fun they're going to have being able to do this thing. And what they really mean is that they're going to have fun taking advantage of you. And that's kind of how it works. And so the trick is to get it to work for yourself. Rather than understand, once you understand how they play the game, then you can adapt to playing the game that way as well and do well. And that's what Tony and I did. We set out to start it a different way than the people that we were working with, which was mainly relationships with record companies as opposed to the groups. So we got started. Here's the front cover of the Dolls Alive cover, and then some of the album covers, Alice Cooper, the Committee, Grand Funk Railroad, Jefferson Airplane. I think that's the West Bruce and Lang, Lou Reed, Burton Cummings, Jesus Christ Superstar. These, and then of course the Licorice Pizza logo that became pretty synonymous with music in Los Angeles. They were the top record store that everybody sort of flocked to. That was my library. It became my and the other people that worked at Pacific Pioneer. We would do field trips where we would go down and spend a half a day in either Tower Records or at Licorice Pizza, just looking because there was no internet. Today, I can just about Google anything and it's going to be there. And in those days, there was the public libraries that didn't have this kind of information. And so it became record stores and disc jockeys talking about it, and like yourself. And that's why we're so great together, because you connect the dots, Joyce. You put that piece of it that's so needed, because otherwise I can sit here and talk about these albums, but you have dots that connect them more than me just saying, I did this one, then I did that one, then I did this one. You have the history that goes along with it. That's why I so appreciate you and the ability to be here with you on the block, and all our neighbors. I mean, it's just an amazing place to be. And I can't thank you enough, for being there for me and realizing that in us. I mean, what do you think?
We're so glad to have you because, as I've talked about, the block party, not only an entertainment element, but we have an educational element. We want to get the story, behind those designs and behind those artists. And you really, bring that to light. And it's a lot of facts or a lot of experiences, that you don't get just by playing a record. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we go beyond, what was big on, the top 10. We look into what I call those naked radio favorites. And what you share goes along with that. We're expanding the horizons. And I think it's also an honor to the listener, and it's also an honor to those performers.
Well, and it's an honor to me too. And you're absolutely right. You putting together the image with the history behind it. I'm sure that as a disc jockey in the beginning of your career, you were limited, you were restricted, and you pushed back against that. That's why you are who you are and what you do today. You're on public radio, you have the block party, and you do what you want, which is really awesome. And it's kind of breaking the chains of the corporate world to I mean, we used to have to fight for some of these covers. That School's Out, cover that we did with the panties, the Jefferson Airplane, the Zoetrope. We had to fight. I mean, the record companies are going, no, no, no. The printers are going, well, I don't know. We've never done anything like that before. I don't think we can do it. And pushing them and making them do it. And thank God for people like Shep Gordon, and a few others that really believed in the fact that what we brought to the piece was valuable and important. And it's so funny because I look back today at a lot of the covers and graphics that we created, especially for Alice. I think between the Rolling Stones and Alice Cooper, they pretty much dominate social media, those two acts. And then there's a bunch of others that come in at another level and another level, another level. But those two guys have a great presence in social media. They're both still touring. And I see, I would say 80% of 80 to 85% of the stuff that's being created for Alice Cooper today and their merchandise stuff is stuff that we created 50 years ago. And what an amazing thought to go, wow, something that I did 50 years ago is relevant today and being exposed to young music fans today. And that's why I really feel that what we're creating here on the block party and this kind of stuff will live forever because of the internet. It'll always be there. Long after we're all gone, this stuff will still be there. And the block parties become a volume of history in music that has a place. It has a place, and nobody can deny that. And when we start talking about at Pacific Pioneer, we did 189 albums together, and then I went on to create. I'm now at album number 250, but 89 of them I think was at the pinnacle of 189 of them were at the pinnacle of what we were creating over that probably about 5, 6 years. And what you see over here is a promotional piece that I did for myself with some of the covers. And there's only one original. And Pacific Pioneer was an original. There were other companies like it, but the artwork that we created, the artwork that is in my collection, over 350 pieces, is pretty amazing, and those are originals. And the way that people like to get merchandise and stuff directly from the original. Nobody else can make that claim. Over here we have some of the other covers. We have Toys in the Attic. We have the Rocks cover that we did. We have Earth, Wind and Fire, and the Guess Who album that we did that was like a junk mailer. We had a lot of fun doing that cover. That cover really stands out because up until we did this, and we did this in 1972, as we were starting in our Pacific Pioneer uniforms, we strive to be better, the best logos, the best, graphics, the best photography. Everything had to be perfect. When Burton came along with this Artificial Paradox cover, it was the other way around. We had to pick the worst type fonts. We had to do the worst photography, the worst illustrations because it needed to look like a junk mailer. It couldn't really be Alice Cooper, Welcome My Nightmare. I mean, that painting, Black Sabbath, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, those covers were amazing. And then all of a sudden along comes Artificial Paradise, and it had to be exactly the opposite. And honestly, that's one of the things that I enjoy most about Pacific Pioneer and the covers that I've created afterwards is that there is such a variety of different images and stuff that was created that, again, like I said, they're still using today. The Rolling Stones just released a t-shirt with this logo on it that Mick Jagger supposedly wore or whatever. It was $900. And the logo that I did is on a lot of their merchandise that they sell in their stores and stuff, and that they still use. So for me, it's like Alice, the logo that I did for Alice, the Bee Gees. They still use that lettering because it's become Foghat. That's another one that it's become synonymous with the band, and the fans love it, and so they just keep on doing it, which is such a great feeling that it gives me to know that I've been able to do something like that new generations of music lovers keep discovering, and the fact that it's still relevant. I mean, how hard is it to say that? In 1972, there was 2 Grammy nominations out of the 6 that were nominated for album cover. We had both. I didn't get credit for the Schools Out cover because I had left Craig Braun, and Craig gave all the credit to Tom Wilkes, who was his new partner and already established in California. There was a lot of animosity between East Coast and West Coast, and Craig needed somebody, and that was part of the reason why, well, I was his only creative director, that he needed to start this office in LA, but I didn't have a New York accent. I didn't have a look and feel that was East Coast for the stuff that I did. So I was the perfect candidate to come out here and at least start an art department and stuff. And that was my goal. But Tom Wilkes was a good choice. He had just broken up with Barry Feinstein. They had a company called Camouflage Productions, and they did the Pearl album. They did some Jackson Brown albums. They did a lot of album covers, and Tom was the graphic designer, and Barry Feinstein was the photographer. And when Tom was creative director at A&M Records before Roland Young, he used Barry a lot for photography. So the two of them really, it's like the guys that worked at Norman Levitt that went off and was going to take Decca Records with him until, they lost out to Norman Levitt with the Jesus Christ Superstar album. So that happened a lot, and Tom Wilkes and Barry Feinstein started Camouflage. They had broken up, and Craig was right there with him, so it became Wilkes Braun. It lasted about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. The last thing that they had done was the Tommy album, which was an incredible. The libretto in that was amazing. The front cover with the big steel ball bearing and stuff, that was all Tom Wilkes. And years later, I got to meet him. I was very reluctant. I had a top copywriter named Tom Pope who wrote a lot of copy for us, and he was best friends with Tom Wilkes. And Tom Pope kept trying to put us together, and I was very reluctant. He took credit for all these things that I did, and I don't have any love there. But it was really interesting because I finally agreed to it. And when Tom and I got together, it was amazing. He was just the nicest guy and apologized for not knowing that I had done any of that stuff. Craig had told him that he did it all. And in fact, that was Craig's thing. He did everything. And we've looked at album covers that we've talked about, and it says Craig Braun, even though I did it. I mean, Craig never really gave credit to anybody except himself. And when he had to, like a photographer or something, he had to do that. But any design and stuff, it was always him, which in a way, Tony and I sort of appreciated that, and that's why my name isn't on any album cover. Any of the 189 album covers that you see that were done at Pacific Pioneer, my name isn't on one of them. Either is Tony's, because it was about Pacific Pioneer. It was creating the brand, and you don't create a brand by diluting it with individual people. We gave credit to every photographer, every illustrator, even though they were staff illustrators. Everybody got credit, but Tony and I, it was more important to establish Pacific Pioneer as a brand. And to this day, now that was 1972. We're like over 50 years, 52, whatever, 4 years ago. And the brand is strong still. People know it. It's really amazing how that happened. But then when you think about it, it was on all these different album covers. And there are a lot of people out there that would just sit and read the credits and know who did what, and
Oh, gee, you talk
yeah,
about me.
yeah. I was sort of dancing around it, but yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why you're so good at saying, well, this guy was here and then he went over there and he did that and he wrote that song, and I don't know any of that. But you do, because you were one of those people that found a lot of the only thing that I was concerned with was making all that type fit in a space. Like we had talked about the history of British Rock Volume 2, where there's all that. That's an open spread, cover, and everything's taken up by copy and stuff. And there's a little area where we're able to sneak the logo in down at the bottom. But, that stuff was always, the way you approached it was completely different than the way I approached it.
You appealed to the nerd, Ernie, which
Yeah.
thank you so much
Yeah.
for doing that. I see the $5 shoes
Yeah.
up there, and I love that design. Yeah, Greg Diamond, he was part of that band,
Yeah.
eventually, with the Andrea True connection, more of your love. He was producer, but I just love that design with
And
the
Peter
shoe
Shapiro.
shine.
Peter signed them to Neighborhood Records, which was like, Peter, we had talked about that. Melanie's husband, who now they both passed away,
I
but
know.
they were just great, and what a great team. And you could see the love. And Peter was an amazing person, and he had the insight to $5 Shoes was one of the early punk bands, and that music hadn't really been discovered yet by the mainstream. And Peter had the intuition to understand that this is going to be something really big. And these were the two Grammy nominations. I've been nominated for three Grammys. The Billion Dollar Babies came after these two. But I know who did this and I know who did that. And to me, that's all that matters. And the fact that God bless you and our family here on the neighborhood that really now know it as well. And you've given me the ability to do that, and I God bless you for that. And so let's talk about this. In 1972, we were nominated for two Grammys, $5 shoes right there, and then you don't see the Schools Out cover in here because this was at the end of 72 for the Grammys, and we wanted to really not. You don't see Jesus Christ Superstar in here. You don't see any of the other stuff, none of the Blues Masters, any of that stuff in here. What we wanted to focus on was album covers that Pacific Ioneer had created. Okay, we didn't want to bring in Schools Out. We didn't want to bring in Jesus Christ Superstar. None of those are in here. These are all covers that Pacific Ioneer did. We were nominated for a Grammy. Both of these two were nominated the same year. And this is how we went to the Grammys. Now, the Grammys weren't really televised. They were at the Palladium, and it wasn't that small, but it wasn't televised yet. It was just, a kind of a quiet award that people got, and it wasn't really as big a thing as it is today. So we decided that we would really represent Pacific Ioneer, and we created these like diver helmets that had ears and hair, and they were an eyeball that we could look out of. So over here you've got me, then you got my wife Bonnie, and you got Tony, my partner. And this is how we went to the Grammys. And they were so blown away that we walked in with Aretha Franklin, and they took pictures. We're in there. They had a thing called the calendar, which was the kind of the brochure that you got when you went to the Grammys, and afterwards it was mailed to you and stuff. And they used this picture in there of us walking in with her, and so it was really, and we wore them through the whole ceremony, and we had actually gotten a complete table with all the people that worked at Pacific Ioneer at the time. It was really a great event, and we also had white gloves and canes that we used. We were very sophisticated in our tuxedos and our hairball with the ears. It was great.
They should have
And
put you on the red carpet.
I know. Well, we did. We walked in with the red carpet. It was Roberta Flack. I'm sorry. It was Roberta Flack that we walked in with, and it was on the red carpet. But nobody ever did anything like this. The Grammys were brand new. I mean, and we ended up actually a couple of years later, we ended up doing all the invitations and the graphic for that year's Grammys. And we had established a relationship with the people at the Grammys because when Schools Out was nominated for a Grammy and I didn't get any of the credit, Shep Gordon wrote a letter to the Grammys saying, hey, you're giving the design credit to the wrong person. The person that did that was Ernie Cefalu, and they sort of responded with a letter. I have all the stuff and I'll send it to you with the images if you like in it. And they responded to Shep's letter saying it's really basically what they said was, it's really up to Craig Braun to decide who gets the credit for this album because he owns the company. And I can respect that because I own Pacific Ioneer, and I can put my name on all these things, not only because I owned the company, but I co-authored every piece. So if we wrote a song together, we would both get royalties. I mean, it's that kind of thing. But in the case of this, only one person got the credit, and that was Craig, and he gave it to Tom Wilkes. So, I mean, but that's another story. Again, having three nominations was great. Doing this was great. We had a lot of fun. And we also this is kind of neat. What you see here is, and I'm going to move out of the way, is an issue of Billboard magazine, which was the premier. There was Cashbox, Record World, and Billboard. And Billboard was the publication for the record industry. So what we did was we took a full page ad in Billboard magazine, and we took the back cover, and we made the back cover look like the front cover. Okay. So it was like this whole mimic, and I'm going to show you over here. I've got the upside down one, but they made us run it upside down. They made us put advertising on it. They made us change a couple of things so that when the person that was stocking the news rack didn't put it in there the wrong way, they would know that this was the back cover for sure. But on the front cover, we got credit for the Captain Beyond album. And so not only did we own the back cover, but we got on the front cover as well. And this is what the front cover looked like over here. And we wrote all these fictitious stories about paper, about Pacific Pioneer. We showed I think this is the Doors album there. And actually we said, I think the headline for that article was the new Doors album, a total ripoff or something like that. And it was really kind of a bad thing to say in retrospect because the album didn't do that well. But we used the word ripoff because you rip off the inside panel and you constructed this zoetrope that was an amazing. I think probably one of the most amazing constructions that I did in the record business, and I was very construction oriented with the Jefferson Airplane package with it folded up into a cigar box, a whole lot of different covers that we did like that to get the consumer more involved. And we had talked about that as well. One of my main objectives with Pacific Pioneer was to get the artist and the fan closer together by creating a visual link and also a hands-on kind of link where you actually take these panels out and construct it.
I'm going to do a mind meld now. Out of all of the albums, I'm asking you, this is a big question. Out of all of the projects, and I'll pick maybe one or two songs that come to mind for you immediately.
Oh, immediately from Jesus Christ Superstar, Yvonne Elliman's I Don't Know How to Love Him. And
Good
on the
one.
Rolling Stone Sticky Finger cover, I would pick Brown Sugar. So those would be the two. And you know what? Let's pick up next week and finish the other stuff because
That would be
would
absolutely
that be okay? So
fantastic.
we'll
That,
call this part one.
yeah.